Hello everyone and welcome to TV Talks, a show where I take a look at both the good and the bad of what television has to offer. Today, we're looking at the Dilbert cartoon. Yes, Dilbert had a cartoon. A lot of you may not know about it because, well, I'm gonna get into that in a minute. For those who don't know, Dilbert is a comic strip created by Scott Adams. You know, that guy who was kicked off Twitter for supporting Donald Trump? That guy. But, anyways, Dilbert started off as just a story about a nerd who had a talking dog and just kind of got into wacky scenarios. It was kind of more an adult Garfield in a sense, only the animal wasn't the focus, it was the human. And while Dilbert isn't as socially reprehensible as John Arbuckle, he's still a pretty weird guy. But then, the comic just shifted focus to Dilbert's life at his work, and then it became huge. The strip is about Dilbert going from his day-to-day life in his workplace and how the workplace is just a nightmare. He's got his lazy friend Wally, who just exists to take the paycheck from his work and nothing else. He doesn't really want to do anything or help. He's just there to get paid, and that's it. There's Alice, who's the exact opposite, who is an uptight know-it-all who does not take slacking off well. There's a naive intern Ashok from India. There's the evil pointy-haired boss, who has no name because you're supposed to envision him as your own boss because he's the dumbest character in the strip by far. There's the evil Catbert, who's basically Cat Satan. There's Carol, the angry secretary to the pointy-haired boss, and then a whole bunch of other tertiary characters that come along the way. This strip was pretty popular and still is today. And so, Scott Adams decided, hey, well, Garfield and Friends was a hit, and Charlie Brown, of course, has a great reputation with its specials, so why not make an adaptation of Dilbert for adult audiences, an animated one? Isn't that great? Yeah, they got a whole bunch of people together like Jason Alexander, Daniel Stern, Tom Kenny, Kathy Griffin, you know, those type of people. People who seemed perfect. When I read the script, because I read the strip, When I read the strip, I started when I was in like second grade, and these are exactly how I envisioned the people to sound. There was only one problem with the show, though. It aired on UPN, the United Paramount Network. Never heard of it? There's a reason. This thing barely lasted the turn of the century. It was basically the equivalent of the Warner Brothers Network, you know, the WB? And hey, that's not around anymore either. Basically, Paramount's attempt to try to make a network ended up being home to things like Shasta McNasty and Homeboys from Outer Space, and nothing, not even WWE or WCW, whichever one was on there, could save it. The only real show on there that ever had any sort of modicum of success was the Dilbert cartoon, more or less. So, let's look at it from an adaptation's perspective, and a perspective of someone who has read pretty much every single strip. Well, it's great. It's a great adaptation. It really is. It takes what the Dilbert strip does and runs with it. Of course, the strips, had they been animated into motion comics, which some of them are, could take no longer than a minute. So you're going to have to take the stories from there and then stretch it out to 23 minutes, which it does. It doesn't hurt that Scott Adams was actually a big advisor on the show. I don't know if he specifically wrote any episodes, but he did have a hand in a lot of it, and he heavily endorsed it and heavily supported it and liked what it was doing. And these stories definitely seem like something that Dilbert would do. There's Dilbert going in search of his father, who is actually at an all-you-can-eat restaurant and refuses to leave until it was all he could eat, and he's been there since Dilbert was like 7. There's the story of how Dilbert tries to stop Y2K. There's a story of Dilbert getting promoted, and then that just causes a whole bunch of stuff going wrong. There's the story of the building decaying and everybody getting mutated, and Wally getting scammed out of supplies in exchange for expired vacation days, stuff like that. It's stuff that you could see Dilbert doing. Now, one thing I have heard Dilbert fans say is that this is a lot weirder than the strip. The strip does have things like talking animals and dinosaurs and people with unreasonable hairstyles, but it never goes to this extreme, like having mutants or Superman people or Stone Cold Steve Austin. But it doesn't matter. This is something that really fits in the universe. And of course, as things like Garfield and Friends or the Charlie Brown specials have changed the strip considerably, this has to do the same, because if you just stuck to what was in the comic, you would not have enough to go around. And it only goes to the reasonable lengths. They don't do stuff like adding Poochie the rapping dog in place of Dilbert, or doing all those horrible adaptation things you always see, like trying to change this humorous strip into a dark, gritty reboot thing. No, that's not what this is. This knows what it is, especially because it was headed by the creator. So this is definitely a good adaptation. Now, the first season was actually a story arc about the Gruntmaster 6000, which was a cell recycling machine, and then it ends up causing pretty much the end of the world with the help of Stephen Hawking. They end up fixing it. The second season, I think, was actually a little bit better, because I did like the Gruntmaster 6000 story arc, but I think it worked better without the story arc in there, because it just gives us more inventive things. My favorite episode is called The Shroud of Wally. It's where a bunch of idiot insurance seminar people who are watching one of those and getting duped, they see a tag from one of Wally's gifts that he had because it was his birthday, saying to Wally, and then this picture of him that looked like it was at the Last Supper, and then the Shroud of Turin, which had his face on it, and then they all of a sudden think that Wally is Jesus, and then they start worshiping him and following him everywhere, and doing whatever he says. It is so funny. It is the funniest episode of the whole show. And also has a lot of good guest stars, yeah. I mean, sure, they had people like Jason Alexander and Kathy Griffin in the main cast, but they also got people like Jerry Seinfeld, Wayne Knight, Stone Cold Steve Austin, as I mentioned, and so many more. All of which appear in the second season, though, because they hit the panic button. Now, the Dilbert cartoon did very well in its first season for a UPN show, because UPN drew abysmal numbers for a lot of its programming. And just because Dilbert was at one of the higher rating sections doesn't mean that it was doing great. I mean, they paired it up with Shasta McNasty, which is considered one of the worst TV shows ever. I don't know if I'm going to talk about it because, well, it's kind of, cliche to talk about at this point. So many people dug into it, and TV Trash already did an amazing review on it, explaining everything what is wrong with that show. But if you want to know just how bad Shasta McNasty was, Scott Adams himself said that the only people who would enjoy it were people who were most likely to die in a bowling ball cleaning accident. So yeah, pairing a show like that with the Dilbert cartoon was ratings poison. So then they decided to change it again and again and again and again. They kept changing time slots. It became inconsistent no matter what they tried to put it in. It was always up against some really big popular network show that it had no chance of beating. So no matter what, the show was doomed to fail. I mean, it was on UPN. If it was on something like Fox, or at the time the WB network, it probably would have kept going. Probably would have lasted 3, 4, or maybe even 5 seasons. It wouldn't still be going on today, because Adams knows where to draw the line. I mean, the strip stayed at like a really good, consistent level, I'd say, and it's still going strong. Although the Dilbert cartoon didn't last a huge long time, it's got a cult following now, and it's still getting the recognition it deserves with more people discovering it. I happily own the complete series on DVD, and hopefully if you guys like the episodes, you should go do it too, because, hey, this thing needs to at least get back on TV. So, I will give the Dilbert cartoon the Archibald seal of approval. And don't worry folks, the next Simpsons season review will be the next video, coming very, very soon. Now just be patient. Alright folks, see you next time. Bye-bye!